Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, guys. I love that part in the song where it says, I've been talking to God. Don't know if it's helping or not. Because this morning I want to talk to you about prayer. Who likes to pray? Who feels like they're very, very confident in praying in the format that we use here? That makes my heart sad. Okay. So let's be honest, So today we're going to wipe all of that away, okay? Because let's just think of what are some different forms of prayer that you've heard of in the world or that you've used?
Praise.
Praise. Singing. Affirmations. Yeah. Gratitude. Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Foxhole prayer.
Ooh, okay. Beseeching. Yes. The Eskimos, they do a silent gesture prayer, which kind of reminded me of how we use namaste. The Filipino Aborigines use a spontaneous prayer that just comes out of nowhere. And then we've got prayers of bowing. We've got prayers of sitting in reverence, prayers of meditation, prayers, so all different forms of praying, right? And so in this philosophy, in these centers for spiritual living, we use a type of prayer called spiritual mind treatment. Spiritual mind treatment. And that kind of sounds really big and scary and like, what the heck is that? So this is where our inspiration, our root, Phineas Quimby, comes into play this morning. Because he, in the philosophy of Phineas Quimby, it says that he realized that people are so impressionable to others' ideas and opinions that we hold on to all of these opinions and we think of them as facts, when really they're just somebody's ideas. And so what he realized and discovered throughout his life is what's called mental healing. Okay? Mental healing. And so mental healing, his philosophy of mental healing and his realization of that is the crux of our form of prayer. Because a spiritual mind treatment is the treatment of our mentality, and treatment being the healing process of our mental state through the spiritual law of mind. The spiritual law of mind says that what you put into it, it says yes. Okay? Are we on the same page right now? Yeah? Okay. So this should be, Ernest Holmes says, this should be very easy. It shouldn't be strenuous. There should be no hard and fast rules on how to do a spiritual mind treatment, on how to pray in this way. But the thing that we must have is a clear mind and a clear understanding. And so what is mental healing? Mental healing is the clearing away of the false ideas and opinions and irrational or distorted thinking that we have held on to. And so when we want prayer, is not the time when we're saying, oh, I'm having unconscious feelings of da-da-da-da-da that I've been holding on to since I was a child. No. Well, some people maybe, but not for me. So for me, it shows up like this, like, oh, I don't want to be unhealthy anymore. It shows up for me in effects. Oh, I don't want to live paycheck to paycheck anymore. Oh, what are some things you've sought prayer for? Health. Yeah. Sanity. So I want peace. I want to be clear. I want to be living on purpose. I don't want to be lost and alone. Right? So we're allowed to look at what's not working out in our lives, okay? I know we're a happy, spiritual, loving community where we believe in God is all and that we're all good, yeah? But let's be real. It doesn't always feel that way. We still have to live life on life's terms, right? And we're only in charge of us. So other people can affect us and they can do things to us. And yet all we actually have control of is our thoughts, emotions, and way that we outpicture ourselves. So we have this idea, okay, I don't want to be unhealthy anymore. So we decide, I'm going to go to prayer. Either you're going to go within to prayer, you're going to go to a minister for prayer, you're going to go to a practitioner for prayer, and please know that your prayer is just as strong as their prayer. They've just been doing it for longer, right? Or maybe not. Heck, I don't know. And so we know what we don't want, and what's the opposite of what we don't want is a God quality. What are qualities of God?
Abundance, wisdom, beauty, joy, clarity, health.
Yes, all of these things, right? Right. So you decide, what is the opposite of what I don't want? We want health. We know when we see life, and life coming up in its most essential self is pure health, right? And so this is what I want to do with you guys. Spiritual mind treatment has 5 steps. And I don't want you to think of these steps as something scary or too intense, okay? I want us to experience this together, because these 5 steps are just a natural progression in consciousness to lift us, shift us, and move us into a clearer idea of ourselves. So would you like to play along with me and just feel into a spiritual mind treatment, this form of prayer? We'll do it together, okay? Okay, I like to close my eyes. I don't know how you feel, but when I pray, I like to be within, because I like to have visualization. I like to feel to my body. So if you want to do that, go ahead, because we're going to do this together. And so the first thing that we want to know is, what is that God quality that we're looking for? So take a moment and think about what's not working in your life. And now flip it to what the God quality would be for that. If you need help, just shout out. Okay. Now that we know what the God quality is, this is the first step in a spiritual mind treatment. It's called recognition. And all we're doing here is moving ourselves, moving our mind, moving our body into an experience of feeling the divine, of feeling, knowing, coming to a conviction of the God of our understanding. And it can take as long as it needs to. Sometimes I have to think about the universe and see how magical and mystical and brilliant it is to really feel God. Sometimes I have to look within my body and see how intelligent it is, how it works without me asking it to know the power of the divine. Bring yourself to your own visual or feeling sense that there is a power, a presence, an intelligence that is in and through all things. Once we come to this feeling, now we can move into what's called unification, where we realize, we begin to identify that if this source and divine presence is omnipotent, if it is everywhere present, then it must be within us. So we bring ourselves through whatever means necessary to a complete satisfaction that we live in good, that we live in the divine, that we live in God. Sometimes we use these words that I am the breath of God. I am the incarnation of Spirit's desire for life. Once we feel that and know that, we have developed and built up enough spiritual authority and consciousness to now move into a realization. And this realization is that if source is, if spirit is all there is, and I am living in that, and I am one with that, then the God quality that I so desire to experience, I speak my word of authority and I declare that that is within me and in my life now. And this part might take a little while. We might take a few moments to really convince ourselves that the quality of God in which we live in, that quality is also within us and in our lives now. This is the process of letting go of those false beliefs, those false ideas, those negative influences of our little self or our ego or other people's ideas that tear at us and that nip at us and that try to get us to forget this ultimate truth, that we are whole spiritual beings, that we are lacking in no way, that we are enough. Oh God, we are more than enough. Feel that now. And once we feel that, and truly feel that, I'll see smiles on everyone's faces once they really feel this and know it's their truth. Their eyes might be closed, but there will be smiles on their faces. Seeing the smiles on the faces, I know that this naturally flows into the gratitude, into that stage of thanksgiving, feeling so much gratitude for the awareness, for the ultimate truth being clear within us, that divine intelligence is all that there is and that we live inside of this and it is flowing in and through all of us. Therefore, that which we speak and know is true in our lives is true now. God, how grateful we are for that. Just be in that for a moment. Feel the gratitude of your clarity of mind. And now is the very most important part. Now we know, because time and space is only an existent measurement for this worldly form, that it is not a measurement in the mind of the divine, that what it is that we desire, what it is that we know is true about ourselves is happening here now. That everything that is visible starts with the invisible, and we say that and we know that, and that is why we say, and so it is now. Yes. Open your eyes. So, was that hard? No. Was it confusing? No. Did it feel like a natural flow? Yes. Do you feel like you can take that home and use it? Yes. Isn't it a powerful spiritual practice? I mean, it's saved my life over and over and over again. And I don't want anyone here, oh my God, it makes my heart want to scream. I don't want anyone here to feel like they can't pray for themselves using any form, including the spiritual mind treatment. It is a treatment of the mind to support and help bring us to the understanding that we are whole. And so remember this for this week. I want everybody to do a spiritual mind treatment for themselves. Just say, God is. God is. Therefore I am. Therefore I am. Therefore that which I desire is true in mine now. Therefore that which I desire is true in mine now. Because we know we wouldn't, don't say this, because we know we wouldn't desire anything that was going to hurt ourselves or another person, okay? You get to have your good, so long as it does not hurt yourself or another person. It's all there for you, okay? So then we say, thank you. Thank you. And so it is. And so it is. Come on, Michael.
Thank you, Reverend Nicole, for that eloquent way that we do our prayer and treatment work. But this is the week, the month, that we go back to our roots. And we have a beautiful story in our roots and where we came from. And I'm not talking about Ernest Holmes when he wrote The Science of Mind philosophy that we love and study here. I'm talking about the courageous and beautiful and wise men and women that came before him. And the topic for today is In Search of the Healing Heart. And as Reverend Nicole said, the healing aspect of our entire philosophy came from a man who I think is a journeyman through the jungle. So his name was Phineas Parkhurst Quimby. And unlike Emerson, he did things just a bit differently. But we get this healing aspect from him. And I want to continue to talk about him, but I want to talk about who we are as a movement, what we believe in as a movement, because we believe that we have a boots on the ground way of doing our life, doing our philosophy, doing our prayer work, and interacting with each other. We believe there's a principle that's always at work, and the principle that keeps coming up, like in the last few years, has been oneness. And that principle is this, is every one of you, no matter what you were doing this morning or 5 minutes ago, is absolutely the essence of the divine in expression right where you are right now. And if you look around you, everyone you see is that same expression of the divine. So we're powerful beyond our measure. And so we can get away from the Palm Club. You want to know what the Palm Club is? It's the poor old me club. And when we get away from the poor old me club, we take our life experiences and say, what is it that this divine being that's me can learn by it? And if we do that, we can make great strides and measures in our life. And Ernest Holmes had some high aspirations for what we would do with our philosophy, because he didn't believe that our philosophy was just to put away in the closet or this old intellectual stuff that he'd write his book and it would die. And he believes we were part of this spiritual transition of the consciousness of the planet. In fact, he said this was his vision of the religion as it went on into the future. And I consider what we do here as more of a way of a life and a philosophy rather than a rote religion with a certain dogma to it. Dr. Holmes says the religion of the future will appear when religion gets over its superstition, science gets over its materialism, and philosophy gets over its duality. We are forerunners in a campaign of spiritual freedom, intellectual integrity, and emotional stability in the spiritual world. It is our privilege to take part in the new spiritual renaissance. He always told us to be open at the top. Dr. Holmes says, as a spiritual movement, let us remain open at the top for further revelation and new understanding. And so back in 1927, Dr. Holmes was asked to write a very succinct statement of what he believes and what we believed as a movement. So in 20 minutes, he wrote what we study today is the we believe statements. My list has 11 of those statements on it. And the ones that applies today, because we're talking about the healing part of our teaching, and it's a huge part, and it all came from Quimby. And what Dr. Holmes' statement says is this: we believe in the healing of the sick and the transforming of conditions through the power of this mind. And we got all this from this man with a 6th grade education that was wandering in the Northeast. Seems like all of our founders come from the Northeast. So Quimby was born in 1802, and he had 2 traits in common with some of the other people who taught us how to heal. The first trait, not all of them had this, but he had this one, was that he was sick and had to heal himself. And the second trait was he was very curious. So when he was in his early 30s, the doctor told him that he had consumption and that he was going to be a sick man the rest of his life. Well, someone told Quimby that an exhilarating horse ride, people had cured themselves of consumption. So Quimby, being the serious sort, the curious sort that he was, he decided to try it out. So he hitched his horse up, got in the carriage. The horse just wasn't cooperating very much, didn't want to run that much. So he went by this farm, and this farmer was tilling the fields. And he asked the farmer, "Could you start my horse?" And back then they come and slap the horse, and that's what they called starting the horse. And the farmer goes, "Sure, let me finish this row, and I'll take care of you." And he did, and the horse ran, and the horse ran. And it took Quimby the entire trip back to finally get control of this carriage with a horse in it. And so at the end of the trip, I assumed that Quimby was probably a bit scared, certainly exhilarated, but there was one thing else that he was. He took a look at himself and felt how he felt, and he had undergone his first healing. He was healed. So time went on. Quimby was a curious sort. There's this man by the name of Charles Poyer who traveled around this young American country in 1836 and lectured on this thing called mesmerism, which was going on in France, which is the precursor to hypnotism. So what happened was that people that were good at it would take it up, and Quimby was one of those. And the way it worked is that the mesmerist would get what's called a subject, which would be an impressionable young man or woman, and Quimby found his name was Lucius Berkmer. And so what they did back in the day, they would travel from town to town and get paid a little bit of money, and they could see things in the distance, see how relatives were doing on ships over, and they could see what they thought was the person's body and make some recommendations on lifestyle changes and medicine. And so that happened for a while. And then Quimby got sick again. And he says, well, I'll just put Lucius into my mesmeric trance and maybe he can help diagnose me. And so they did that. And the doctors had told Quimby that the pain in his back was from his consumption, and that his lungs and his kidneys were infected. And he asked Lucius what he saw. He says, I see your kidneys broken apart and this pieced together by a thread. And Quimby took it in. It was probably a pretty hard thing to take in. But Lucius said one more sentence, which changed everything. He said, would you like me to put them back together? And mentally, he did that. And Quimby then had his second healing. And then Quimby, being the curious, astute sort that he is, he put it together that it wasn't the mesmerism that was doing anything. That what Lucius was seeing in this mesmeric trance was what the mind of the patient was seeing. So he kept working with that, and then he realized that back in the day they thought mesmerism had some animal magnetism, but Quimby recognized that's not what was doing the healing. What was doing the healing is the activity of the mind of the healer influencing the mind of the patient. And he made a statement to that, and when he really understood it, he says this: if your mind has been deceived by some invisible enemy into a belief, you have put it into the form of a disease with or without your knowledge. So he realized that it was all about the influence of mind upon mind, and that as we thought, as we teach every day, as we think, we create our life experience around it. So from that point forward, it's been a big part of our philosophy. And we've developed it into the eloquent way that Reverend Nicole just shared with you. We come from very, very strong stock. And I'm so glad to be able to tell you that story. Thank you.